Welcome to another episode of the Silmarillion Sessions. We're your hosts, Mikhail Thompson and Mr. William Lassiter. And today we are going to be discussing the Darkening of Valinor. Shadow Spider comes into the scene as companion of Melkor, scares the bejesus out of him, and puts the lights out. To start with, I think it's helpful with this chapter, and particularly the idea of Ungoliant. There's this gigantic. She's framed as a spider, but obviously much more than a spider. It's mentioned in the text that even Melkor kind of backs off a little bit, right? Somehow she's this dark, chthonic force. I think helpful to give a little bit of framework of some mythological foundations to help us understand how to orient ourselves with this. So, Lassiter, what can you tell us about that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that scene there. I'll read that in just a second. But yes, even the great big bad Morgoth himself is sort of like, "Whoa, back off, lady." It's like no fury, But yeah, let's how about this? We'll start off with I'll read this paragraph here about where she dwells, and I want to cover that bit in terms of the of Middle Earth. Okay, and then a little bit about her origin and the mythology behind her, and then we can go maybe into what she does, she and Melkor. So it says here in chapter 8, in the Darkening of Valinor, thus unseen, Melkor, Morgoth, came at last to the dark region of Avathar. That narrow land lay south of the Bay of Eldamar, beneath the eastern feet of the Pelori, and its long and unmournful shores stretched away into the south, lightless and unexplored. There beneath the sheer walls of the mountains and the cold, dark sea, the shadows were deepest and thickest in the world. And there in Avathar, secret and unknown, Ungoliant had made her abode. Okay, so this is down in the southern part of the Undying Lands, which, if I can show the map here, the Undying Lands are brightness and beauty because of these two trees. And you can see everything in the Undying Lands primarily because of what the two trees shine, the light they shine on the whole land. And Valinor, there are different depictions of Valinor because this region here to the west is kind of undefined. Somewhere over here is this ocean, but all this is these green fields and beauty and light, and it all emanates from this territory here, the plains of Yavanna and Lorien, and the two trees that are here. But down here to the south, way down at the bottom, there's this dark area because the light just doesn't get there. And there are these mountains down there as well. So we're looking at this lower part here, which is Avathar, very lowest part of the Undying Lands of Aman. And I don't know whether it's crescent shaped or not, as it shows here, but might as well just go with it. And Ungoliant's lair is way down here. It's kind of like that region in South America closest to Antarctica, cold and dark and just away from the light. Something like what Shackleton was. Okay, so here's the rest of the text. The Eldar knew not whence she came, but some have said that in ages long before, she descended from the darkness that lies about Arda, when Melkor first looked down in envy upon the kingdom of Manwë, and that in the beginning she was one of those that he corrupted to his service. One of those, meaning, as it says in the Tolkien Gateway, it says that she's probably one of the early goddesses, so to speak. She's a spirit, right? Takes on the form of a monstrous spider. So it's shrouded in mystery, but it's believed by some of the Eldar that she was one of the Ainur. So it's possible
That puts her at Valar level.
Yeah.
So far as Valar, the Ainur who enter into Arda. But that's big. She's not just that's not a minor thing. No. She's not just like some elemental spirit or something like that.
No, she's tremendous. She is a power of the earth, so to speak. One of these early divine spirits. It says the holy ones, first beings created by Iluvatar. and was probably there in the singing, I would assume, that originally started the whole business.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, right. She would have been one of the singers if she's one of the Ainur.
Yeah.
Then that's yeah. Thank goodness, I had never realized that actually.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of mind bending that what we're dealing with when we're dealing with Ungoliant is something akin to Melkor, maybe even before Melkor. Very, very powerful, very old, and not very nice, as it says.
Right.
Melkor had corrupted her, right? But it may be more than that, as we shall see in a minute here. The text goes on and says, she had disowned her master, Melkor, desiring to be mistress of her own lust, taking all things to herself to feed her emptiness. And she fled to the south, escaping the assaults of the Valar and the hunters of Orome, for their vigilance had ever been to the north, and the south was long unheeded. Thence she had crept towards the light of the blessed realm, for she hungered for light and hated it. So all this time she's been creeping towards that blessed realm out of these darker and colder regions of Middle-earth. And there she lives down there in the lowest part of Arda. So anyway, mythologically speaking, Ungoliant, the name comes from two sources. Let's see if I scroll down here. The name comes from two sources here in Sindarin. It's a direct loan from Quenya, Ungoliante, Ungwe, and plus Liante. And we click on this one here. It says, Ungwe is a noun meaning spider's web, spider's web. So she's like the gloomy spider or the gloom weaver, so to speak. Yeah, that's kind of cool. But he does an interesting thing with this character because it's not really in other mythology that you see this kind of depiction of spiders, strangely enough. A lot of people writing about it or talking about it say that this is primarily because Tolkien didn't like spiders and that's why he put her in there. Which, again, I know you shake your head and I shake my head because we're like, yeah, what ball to that? Just the whole biographical read to me is just kind of annoying.
Right.
Down to spiders, I hate them. Let's make them evil. I think he's doing something much.
It's it's if he didn't write anything anywhere ever mentioning that maybe there if you don't have any other evidence to go off of, I suppose you could speculate. Tolkien being Tolkien, everything, he's prolific, letters everywhere. This kind of thing is talked about.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned somewhere specific. It's not coming to mind exactly, but I recall coming across or hearing somebody relating this. He talks about spiders have this somehow spiders are unique, even though they don't feature heavily in all mythologies, necessarily northern mythologies as prominently as what we see here. I think he was kind of explaining this a little bit in one letter somewhere, that spiders are uniquely antagonistic towards man. Man has this sort of like uniquely antagonistic relationship with spiders, like universally part of just human nature. That more than any other creature, I think that was the idea, that more than any other creature, the spider has this sort of thing. I don't remember it exactly, the context. I'm sure he said a little bit more, but I've been thinking about that, and I don't know that I would fully agree, but I think different peoples have different relationships with different kinds of spiders, insofar as you might have spiders feature in various folk tales, fables, that kind of thing. It's not always so super negative, but but you've got different kinds of spiders, Remove myself from the spot here. But you've got different kinds of spiders, and some are definitely. I mean, there's your basic. I don't know, where everybody's listening from, but across the temperate parts of the world, there's your basic daddy longlegs, which is essentially harmless, hardly a spider, mostly it's detritus. Anyhow, and then you've got some of those creepy spiders that will like hunt you down and find you. They see you and they'll start running across the yard. These like tropical regions things, spiders that will like track you and pursue you. But we have something like this in Italy. It's much smaller and more benign in its actual, it's in its ability to inflict harm, but it's malicious as all hell. I mean, these things you'll kind of lay out a picnic blanket or something like that, and you're on the grass, But you'll see it, and it'll see you, and it'll just make right for you. For whatever reason, but it certainly seems threatening. I mean, the thing's no bigger than a window spider,
Still,
what you might see sitting on a rose petal or something like that. But it's still, the thing shouldn't pay attention to me, but here it is. It takes notice of you and then pursues you. But there's something about a spider. I mean, like what is it about a spider? What are spiders like? So what's the essence of a spider? One is craftiness. Um, there's sometimes even in various proverbs, they're extolled for their wisdom. We should be more like spiders. Sit and wait, craft your net, and be patient. But they also, I mean, they gut out they catch something and they
yes.
bite it. They inject venom into it, which melts the interior of the thing,
Hmm.
and they suck out the life of the thing, but not in a way where the thing becomes like an empty bag. They fill it with their venom, and so you've got this action of sucking life and replacing that life with with toxic, with death, right? So it's the replacement of life with death,
So
and that's
there's
just the
this,
basic fact of their biology. Like that's just how they do their thing.
yeah. So there's this natural symbolism that exists already in the creature itself, and you could add to
Mm-hmm.
that they're distinctly inhuman. The 8 legs,
Right,
for instance, and the
8 legs.
arachnid,
Yep,
the
a billion eyes.
billion eyes, the spinning of webs, all this. It's really and as humans, we have a natural repulsion to them. I was sitting in my favorite chair over there the other morning. Spider comes up over the edge of it, and I didn't flip out, but I got a little spooked. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember
Right.
that down in Texas, I got bit by one of those brown recluse spiders, and
Oh my goodness.
the bruise went from my wrist all the way down to my elbow. It was huge, big old blue bruise.
Yeah.
Doctors said that it was fortunate that it didn't go any further because they call us necropsy, and so it would have caused the
Right.
foot to deteriorate. A lot of people have to have it actually excised from their arms and legs in order to stop the necropsy from spreading too much. But fortunately, I didn't have that. But it
And
was
that's
not.
actually no, that's not pleasant. And that seems to me like that's exactly the kind of thing that Ungoliant does, right? She bites into
Yeah,
something, and then death spreads from that point on. It's self-replicating, self-spreading.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
mm-mm.
And they've been around for a long time. You said that we have a unique relationship with spiders. Absolutely, because they've been around longer than we have. There's a
They're
great
ancient. Yeah.
there's a great series, walking. What is it called? Walking with Monsters. I think it was done by the same people that did the Walking with Dinosaurs series. And
Okay.
apparently, on the Earth, back when our oxygen levels were much much higher and our atmosphere was a lot denser, more like an ocean atmosphere than what we have now. So if you can imagine the Earth being covered by a sort of water, but it was an atmosphere of oxygen, spiders grew
Mm-hmm.
to enormous proportions, and we're talking like 8 feet across. Like huge creatures apparently. Yeah, it's truly amazing. This is like, I looked this up. This is what's called the Megarachnae. It's a genus of Eurypterids. Okay, these are aquatic arthropods. So they
Mm-hmm.
lived in the sea. Some of these did, and then on the land later on. And this one was 21 inches across, which is pretty darn big. This was like a 2 foot spider or something like this. And these other ones were just enormous spiders. I maybe
Wow.
just for the sake
Right.
of, I better check my facts before I go talking about an 8 foot spider. Just make sure that I'm right on that. Um, But anyway, the point being is these creatures were around for quite some time before humans ever walked the earth. And even now, when we talk about lobsters and we talk about crabs, they're arachnids. They're the same type of creature as spiders are.
That's true. And that just the image, those two things put together, these massive things crawling over a super dense Earth, and then the connection with crabs, is how we've mentioned recently, talking about what's the guy's name? Time Machine, right? Isn't that how kind of how it ends? He takes it forward and he goes all the way like a billion years in the future or something, and it's just crabs covering a sun-scorched dead Earth.
Uh, yeah. So like they're gonna outlive everything else.
Right.
No, highly, it's an unpleasant thought, but they are creatures that have been on this earth and have been doing all sorts of mischief for quite some time now. Whether or not the web spinning ones were around that long, I don't really know. The ones that were
Right.
depicted walking with monsters, like the Megarachne, were basically more like tarantulas. They were not web spinners.
Hunting spiders.
Hunting
Yeah.
spiders. They would, I guess that they would create holes in the earth and live in the earth and then come
Sure.
out to attack. But I don't know if they spun webs. I really am not sure on that.
Yeah, because there are definitely spiders. I mean, that's the thing. These are the spiders I was mentioning that find you on the lawn and then chase after you.
Yeah.
They're hunting spiders. They don't sit and wait. So not all spiders are sort of the patient, contemplative types that sit on the windowsill. There are others that go out and hunt.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the kind of spider Ungoliant is, where she's not sitting patiently waiting for things to crash into her web. She's out hunting.
Yeah.
She's approaching the light. She hates it and wants to consume it. Um, One other aspect of that, if I can shift from the specifically spider theme of her, that I noticed with the map is Melkor occupies the north,
Yeah.
which would be the left-hand side of the map on a usual map. So all these maps are made by modern people who put north up.
Oh.
Traditionally, maps are east up. And
Mm,
Tolkien's early maps were east up as well. Like the ones he actually drew are
interesting.
east up, right? They're properly oriented. The orient is up. You note this on the front of the book, and you look at the in the Hobbit, right? He even mentions that right there. And he mentions in there self-referentially that it is east up, by the way, oriented properly.
Mhm.
But what that means though is that the north is to the left. And so
Yeah.
in the ancient Near East, to east is up as well. It makes perfect sense. The sun starts at the top and falls to the bottom every day. That's how that works.
Mm,
And it rises again. If the sun's going to rise, it's got to go from bottom to top, which means it goes from east west to east, right? And then it comes down over the course of the day.
yeah.
That being the case, then the sinister side of the map is the north, and so there's a common trope going back to, I mean, throughout sort of at least Hebrew and Syriac literature, bad things come from the north. There's a tradition, even you see this even in Canterbury Tales. In I don't know whose tale it is about the summoner, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, maybe it was the Reaper's tale, then about the summoner, whatever it is. And he's talking about, and the character in the tale encounters the devil in disguise as a summoner, as a fellow, bailiff, basically. And he says, "Oh, I come from a far north country." And oh, cool, they get along. But and that's a wink to the reader that it's the devil, because the devil dwells in a far north country, as is said by the prophet Isaiah, something like that.
Wow.
And so you've got Melkor occupying the north, and so far that has made sense. Okay, he's got Angband, it's a nasty, evil, dark, violent place. It's in the north. Okay, so far we're good. But then you've got the south, and you say, what? How does the south feature? Well, the south is, from northern cultures, right? They don't go like there's a South Pole that's a polar. I talk about that in an equivalent way. Not you don't typically see much of that, to my knowledge, but the south goes down to warm because you move south from the north and you're moving towards the equator. But the south is often a referential point for the fringe, the edge of the edge of the world, right? So it's another edge, and so you get something that's, and if we remember that the whole of Arda at this point is a flat disk, because the world hasn't been bent into a sphere yet. It's a flat disk. You've got all around is the encircling ocean, but then beyond that is the darkness, right? In any direction, it's the darkness. So she's coming from the darkness. She's coming from the darkness on the opposite side as Morgoth, and in a way that almost, in some ways, has you hemmed in, right? She's also coming from the fringe, but Tolkien takes this further. It's not just from the edges of the known world, that which is foreign, that which sort of is amorphous, although it certainly has those characteristics. He takes that, which is, and that's common, I think, across all mythologies in some way, right? Coming from the outside, the amorphous other, the monster. Um, but here he takes that and puts it really to a polar extreme. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought that was really interesting that she's on par. She's not like just a dragon, right? That is a Morgoth pet. She's somehow an equal, a colleague of
Mm,
Morgoth's. a dark force we had not reckoned on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking this the other day about the difference between dragons and Balrogs and the character of Ungoliant and even Melkor. Like, why would Tolkien go and make the one of the most sinister characters in his lore a spider and not dragon?
Right.
That to me is kind of intriguing.
It
All,
is. It is.
all the dragons, as if I remember right, all the dragons are masculine dragons. Does
In
that sound?
Tolkien, I think one would be justified in assuming that. Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly Smaug is masculine,
Yep.
and yeah, I think it's probably true.
Okay.
And in Western mythology, on the whole, dragons I think tend to be not always, but they tend to be masculine, and they
Yep.
tend to be talkers, right? You talk with the dragon, you try not to get tangled in their webs of ratiocination and clever speech. You know,
Yeah.
they're perilous in that way, but they're not all consuming, right? They're not this
Oh,
dark. There's a definitive shape to a dragon, right?
yeah.
You know when there is a dragon, you know where he starts, where he ends, and they mesmerize you, they suck you in, they poison you, um, but they'll burninate the countryside and all of that. But they're more tangible, right? They're more this worldly.
Yes. And their main goal is the capture of treasure, mostly.
Right, right.
Um,
Capture,
it's all
guarding of treasure, water sites, certain
Yep.
springs, wells, that
Yep.
kind of thing. Yeah.
So they're not out to suck the lifeblood out of living things, though they do sometimes. They're more out there they're attracted by these heaps of treasure and hordes of treasure more than anything
Hmm.
else. Which,
It's almost like they're invited by the actions that man takes.
yeah, 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 and or dwarves, and the
Yeah, right.
treasure is like sunlight. They're similar things, but it's a
Hmm.
different mythology in that the dragon, the masculine thing, is attracted to a physical creation, a physical representation of the light, and
Hmm.
this creature, this Ungoliant, is referred to as feminine distinctly over and over again. She, of the Ainur, and
Yeah.
she's to the light of the trees, the living things. Um, and that raises the question of whether Tolkien, well, there's, of course, the popular question is Tolkien sexist, blah, 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 which again is BS. It's more
Because
that,
Varda, Elbarath Gilthoniel, clearly, like, he's not. This is because there's a very. I just sorry, hit the rant button, and just reminding everybody that there's this tendency, because we're so conditioned with the media environment of today, to read frame by frame as standalone units and think very simplistically about things, and take this chapter alone as though it's separated from everything else. See,
yeah,
she's the real villain in this is the woman. See,
yeah,
he's anti-feminine. No. This one happens to be evil. There are plenty
yeah,
of there. In fact, the good women, females, far outweigh the bad ones,
yeah.
and so on and all that. Just
And
take everything in context.
and also he's dealing with symbolism. He's dealing with mythological world, and in the mythological world, there is such a thing as a masculine force and feminine force. Male and female participate in the masculine and feminine force in
Mm.
mythological
And
genre
grammatical.
and
Yeah.
grammatical. Right, exactly. It's not that the masculine and feminine force are male and female. It's that male and female are masculine and feminine participants. And so whatever
Exactly.
forces or powers of the universe are, they are this way and they are that way. And we call them masculine and feminine because they have certain traits that we recognize as being distinctly this or distinctly that. But
Protons
yeah,
and electrons. Okay.
yeah, exactly. Right. All the dragons in Tolkien, it looks like, I just looked it up, they look like they're all masculine. Okay, so Glaurung and Calagon,
Mm-hmm. That was the one.
the Fire Drake of Gondolin, Smaug, Gostir, even one I haven't heard of, Lamthank. I don't really even know that
Yeah.
one, but they're all
There's a
masculine. Right?
snack or something or other. Yeah.
Yeah.
To say nothing of Chrysophylax the Rich.
Right, because right, exactly. They're all masculine dragons. Okay, so there's that. Right. Now, this is interesting to me when I start looking at the origins of all this stuff, because as you said, humans have this very distinct relationship to spiders. And they've been around longer than we have, and there's something which I'm sure at one point we were terrified of, and still have a natural reaction, the creepy crawlies. But we go back in time and to look at a few examples. One of the more famous is the Greek one of Arachne, and here they have the story of Arachne was a woman who, I think she challenged Athena. Yeah, she challenges the goddess Athena to a weaving contest, because she thinks she's as good as Athena.
I'm better than the goddess. Yep.
Right? Athena could find no flaws in the tapestry Arachne woven for the contest. The goddess became enraged and beat the girl with her shuttle. Right? And then she's transformed into a spider. So, and this is in the poet Ovid in 43. Yeah. And basically in his book Metamorphoses, there's no cause and effect in Metamorphoses, just for the record. It's not like you do this and therefore you get that. It's just stuff happens.
So that happened, exactly.
Yeah. Athena basically gets mad that she was challenged and lost the contest, and so she beats Arachne with her shuttle and then transforms her into a spider.
Right, it's going to make you ugly and eight-legged.
Exactly, and various people have said, this is there were reasons for this, or there's a fickleness to the goddess Athena, or don't mess with the goddess Athena, things like that. But I think one could also say that there's something of the Tower of Babel, hubris, challenging the gods business here that is not very good. It's not very healthy. And so she's transformed into this otherworldly creature, the spider. And it's kind of an origin myth about where the spider comes from. I don't think Tolkien is referring to this. Okay, the spider here that she's changed into is not a nice spider, but it doesn't mean that she's totally evil either. And the story is almost like this is why spiders come into existence, and this is a connection between weaving and spider. That's all. It's not really evil story. You look at other myths that I just thought were interesting. There's a very old one from Egypt, the goddess Naif, or Nurt, the terrifying one. It says she was an ancient Egyptian deity. She was said to be the first and prime creator who created the universe and all it contains, and that she governs how it functions. She's the inventor of birth. She was the goddess of the cosmos, fate, wisdom, water, rivers, mothers, childbirth, hunting, weaving, and originally war. Okay. So she is a spider goddess, Naif. But again, she's not evil. She's just a goddess who creates all these things and then governs over these similarly related things. And that happens often in Egypt. You get various things piled onto each other that seem related.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, rivers are kind of like webbed networks of veins of the earth, right? I mean, to pick an example of that.
Yeah, and later commentators will say that the weaver of everything is also that creator of what we call the logos, the pattern, the structure of the world. And
so we get the fates and Clotho kind of following the same idea, right?
Same idea, the fates. And we'll see in Norse mythology that they have the Norns, who are and they're associated with spiders. And so there's this thing about weaving that spiders do, which is it's like the physical world is woven together by these powers, these netters, these characters in some way. And maybe later on under the Gnostics, you would have this image that the world is darkened and traps the spirit, traps the divine spirit in this web. So, you have that element that goes on there. There are other characters. There's Anansi in African folklore, and he's just a trickster.
Yes.
So that's a fun, but not evil, again. Just a trickster.
Right, not evil. Yep, exactly. Often bumbling around sometimes too, in his attempts to trick other people. It gets one pulled over on himself.
That's right. Like Coyote does in the other story.
Exactly. It's the Coyote type character. Yeah.
And
exactly right.
interestingly enough, I found like Loki as well in Norse mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking up this bit here. It says, where is it here?
He has a spider connection.
Yeah, he does. Spider sometimes referred to as Loki in a metaphorical sense, as their webs are compared to the fish net that Loki crafts in certain surviving Viking Age myths. From all of this, the most straightforward meaning of Loki's name would seem to be knot or tangle. So the very word seems to mean knot or tangle. Loki.
Oh, sure. So spiders are tanglers, therefore. I gotcha.
Yeah. This website points out that the trickster Loki, one of the more intriguing etymologies of his name, connects to the Swedish dialect word "lock," which is in Swedish spider, which places Loki in the world continuum of trickster gods with animal forms. And that's all interesting. So even the Norse mythology has spiders connected to weaving, connected to trickster stuff, connected to fate with the Norns. It's all interconnected in this great web of mythology.
Right. Right.
Now, what really intriguing to me, and I don't know whether Tolkien tapped into this in terms of his reading, his knowledge, or whether he tapped into it because he just was aware of what myths are, just naturally. But there's an interesting thing in American Indian mythology too, where they have the tale of what's called Spider Woman or Spider Grandmother. And Spider Grandmother is an earth goddess. And there's even, this is in Hopi mythology, and there's also one in Iroquois mythology as well. Spider Grandmother, which I'm going to butcher the name now in Hopi, Kokyangwuti, okay, also called Gogyeng Sawuti, among many other names, can take the shape of an old or timeless woman or the shape of a common spider in many Hopi stories. When she is in her spider shape, she lives underground in a hole that is like a kiva. When she's called upon, she will help people in many ways, such as giving advice or providing medicinal cures. Spider Grandmother is seen as a leader, a wise individual who represents good things. So in Hopi mythology, the spider is this good, beneficent creature. It helps human beings. It doesn't just attack them and destroy them. But at the same time, you also have characters like in Seneca mythology. This is in the Eastern American Indians. You have a character called the Giant, pronounce it wrong, but this is a monstrous 6-foot tall spider that can't be killed because it has its heart hidden underground. And the great character Hiawatha of Wenda discovers the heart of the Digean and kills it. So so you've got the beneficent Spider Woman, but you also have the evil spider living underground character. So the question would come up: why are there both? Why are they both? And lastly, to throw into this is from Teotihuacan, so the pre-Columbian, and they have the great goddess Teotihuacan, and the great goddess is, she's basically a goddess of creation, and here's all her different physical aspects. But it says the great goddess is thought to have been a goddess of the underworld, darkness, the earth, water, war, possibly even creation itself. So there's that interesting war connection that we saw in another one of the spider goddess types. To the ancient civilizations of Central America, the jaguar, the owl, and especially the spider were considered creatures of darkness, often found in caves and during the night. The fact that the great goddess is frequently depicted with all of these creatures further supports the idea of her underworld connections. So the great goddess who is responsible for the creation of everything is also a spider goddess in this mythology. So the question that comes up is, on the one hand, what gives? Why do all these different cultures have the spider, but they always have it in slightly different roles, either as sinister or as good? It's a valid question, I think, to ask. And then what's Tolkien doing with it, and where is he coming from with his mythology? Any thoughts or insights into any of that?
I don't know. It's I think, there's in some ways, I think there's something entirely original in his approach,
Hmm?
weaving her as a spider. He's drawing upon something that is not clearly precedented. Um, what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
A common mythological trope, like in ancient fratricide, right? Brother kills brother, right? You see this in Romulus and Remus, Cain and Abel, etc., that kind of thing. Or, other, I mean, the dragon type thing. Okay, that's the thing that's been done. We know what a dragon is, or even a unicorn. He doesn't really incorporate those into Middle Earth, but that's an idea. That's a thing we would recognize. Um, in some variant across different cultures. But early fratricide, um, as just an example of a type. We don't have like this demon spider thing. That seems to me new. Um,
Yeah.
there are gods, there are divine creatures with associations with spiders, but not necessarily any more prominently figuring than any other animal association. And they're not all universally evil. They're not all universally good. It seems to be doesn't deviate kind of from the norm. It's just a scatter plot of different deities with attributes, animal connections. Spiders no different from anybody else. Um, in terms of standing out, where this stands out, um, and they continue to stand out. Spiders don't play a certain spiders play a significant part in the plot of some of the stories in the legendary, Lord of the Rings, obviously. Um, the Hobbit, we know the spiders are there. They actually have a lot. They play a powerful role, not so much with the plot, so much with the character development. Right, Bilbo really becomes Bilbo the warrior when he slays the spider for the first time, rescues the dwarves from their death. Um, but they don't play a big plot role, but they're there, right? The spider continues throughout Middle Earth to unanimously be this evil force.
Yeah,
And
it's not
actually,
a
if you
good.
think about it, the connection between the spiders of Mirkwood that Bilbo encounters, they're monsters, and he has to fight them. But we kind of, giant spiders can get it, right? You know, reading the Silmarillion, like this passage in the Silmarillion, the Darkening of Valinor, and understanding then where those spiders come from, they were actually way more sinister, far,
Yeah.
far more dangerous and demonic than Bilbo was aware of.
Yeah.
you know, he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's some bad Attercop," and he taunts them. He makes a little like playground nursery rhyme mocking them while he tries to draw them off to the dwarves can recover enough to run away. And remembering that the Hobbit is the frame of the Hobbit is that it's written by Bilbo, right? And so and the Lord of the Rings is essentially written by Frodo, and then continued by Sam, and eventually Merry and Pippin. So it's and these are people who've seen a little bit more tragedy and darkness than what Bilbo did, and so they're on to a little bit more. That's why Shelob is obviously more nasty, right? And there's a darker we understand that in that text, but even there's a sense that she's just a mountain monster, right? There are a lot of monsters, and throughout later in the Silmarillion, we see there's a shadowy place in the mountains where people go and they never come out of again, and we know that it's inhabited by giant spiders. But all that means is these are sort of the offspring, the nymphatic, the small little, larval sort of offspring of Ungoliant in some way. That they're not just big nasty creatures, although they may be diluted in some way from Ungoliant's force. Ultimately, they have their provenance in being at minimum at the level of Maya, like Sauron, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Shelob is more on par with Sauron, which also true of a Balrog, by the way. Like Balrogs are of the same general um, class of
Yeah.
being as Sauron, as well, any of the Maya, right? I mean, that's the thing. So Balrogs of that same order. Um, you know, Perhaps the Kraken, the creature in the water outside of Moria. I mean, that has a
Oh,
lot of arms and legs too. That's interesting. Not a spider, and perhaps even more powerful than a Balrog, just less sociable, like less
Yeah.
socially interested. Um, that if that thing grabbed Frodo first out of all of us, right? If that would have succeeded at pulling Frodo in, I don't think Sauron would have gotten the ring. You know what I mean? Like, I think you would have had a Dark Cthulhu rise as a new lord over Middle Earth out of that. Because this is a creature who could contend with and potentially is even more powerful than Sauron, given the right circumstances, because it's something from the deep bowels of the earth. And actually, Tolkien mentioned Gandalf, right? Gandalf mentions when he comes, Gandalf goes into the bowels of the earth, this place
Yeah.
that's associated with the more sinister spiders. Well, he goes into the bowels. There are things down there, more ancient even than the Balrog. Uh, and you wonder what kinds of things those are. And maybe Ungoliant is still hiding out, licking her wounds, as it were,
Mhm.
deep down in the earth. But he's doing something really unique here. Yeah, spiders are nasty, but this Ungoliant figure, she's a darkness that defies logic and defies physics. Because we know that darkness is just the absence of light, right? Light shines and it disperses darkness. That's the nature of light, right? There are photons, they come in, and then there's not a lack of photons. That's how that works, kids. But Ungoliant is darkness, and she's a darkness that's a positive power. When she comes in, light disappears. As we see later in the chapter, the description that she oozes out this darkness that can penetrate into the eyes and then makes the eyes dark, right?
Yeah.
Her darkness can spread and make other things dark, like that
Mm.
necropsis that or not was it narc what yeah necro anyway death juice that spreads up your arm and makes other things, turns it all into itself. um she has this power that she can extinguish the trees, not only by, we can think about, yeah, she poisons the trees. Okay. She kills them like a spider kills a bug or a bird, if you're into the whole tarantula thing. Um, but she doesn't just kill the light by unplugging it from the socket. She kills the light by replacing it with darkness. And that
Right.
darkness emanates then. I mean, the light in Valinor becomes darkness. And how great is the darkness? I mean, that that goes against everything we know philosophically and physically, like scientifically, about light, which,
Mm.
like, she's something from outside the world that does not obey the rules of physics.
Right. So there's a lot there in what you said, and one of the things to point out is that the this I don't want to sound like a crank or like a wacko here, but our vision in the modern physics world is that darkness is an absence of light. That whole framework is predicated upon the Christian views of God as a thing, a being, and not a nothing. But that is
Mm-hmm.
predicated on the Jewish views of the Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem, and then scooping out from himself in that act of the Tzimtzum an empty space in which to pour creation. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm saying that the way that we conceive it is deep rooted in Jewish mythology, which itself is connected even to, you could say, to a degree, Zoroastrian philosophy and theology as well. But there
Yep.
are religions in the world that seem to have suggested that light and dark are contending with one another, that they're equal forces or powers, and that's hard
You
to get
get
the
a
mind.
different physics. If Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing, is it's easy for us to forget, and perhaps too complex to really do justice here.
Yeah.
Um, but the basic awareness that so much of what we take for granted as basic, you know, we know reality, basic laws of the universe are this way. Gravity works because look, it does. How we think about these things is so deeply conditioned by and predicated on certain, let's call them worldview assumptions, cosmological assumptions about that we start from. There are first principles that we start from that are not in fact intuitive, that are not in fact obvious anyway, and necessarily the case for everybody. They might be true, but I'm saying that it's not that every human being in all of time has, it says that X, Y, Z is obvious. And if you've got I don't know, a Zoroastrian substrate, right, as so world power 3,000 years ago, Persia, whatever, you're and that through different alternative histories, right, had that developed and grown, you could have a very different physics perhaps than what we have today, because we
Yes.
would like your starting principles are just very different.
Yeah.
Same could be said of Zen Buddhism or the cult of Kali.
Hmm.
Although maybe the cult of Kali is really becoming more of a thing. The recent trends in technology and actually some Silicon Valley types practicing various
Yeah.
cultic devotions in that vein. You see, it's a very different world, right? It's a very different perspective on and very different assumptions about reality, and then you come up with different scientific theorems from that.
Yeah.
Your concept of what science is, it flows
Yeah.
out of those cosmological, mythological assumptions.
So in terms of our local Ainur here, I think that what Tolkien is doing is tapping into something extremely ancient. And
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian and Greek theology, I know, they had masculine and feminine forces for sure. But every masculine and feminine force had a positive and a negative side as well. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't there was good masculine, bad feminine, or good feminine, bad masculine. It's that there was good masculine and good feminine, good and bad masculine and bad feminine. Okay. Now, that being the case,
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with the feminine powers, the netters, the netaru of Egypt, you're talking about the feminine power that wants to contemplate and generate life and to nurture things and weaves a home for everybody and does all these different things, is a helper. All those are positives. And we saw that in the mythological tour that we just took a second ago. But there's a negative side to the feminine as well, which we call currently the smothering mother. It's the feminine wants to devour and seek revenge and doesn't come out with violence, but backbites and nitpicks and goes behind someone else in order to undermine them and doesn't want their little children to grow up at all. And
Yeah.
that element, which is the negative side of that feminine force, is
Mm-hmm.
that's what we see, I think, here with the Ungoliant character. She is. It's not insignificant that she comes across. It says here, westward shimmered the fields and pastures of Yavanna, gold beneath the tall wheat of the gods. Okay, so she comes across those fields of Yavanna, Yavanna is a powerful feminine deity.
Right. Yeah.
And Ungoliant is traipsing through that other woman's territory. That I can't help but think of one girl ticking off another, and suddenly get hell breaks loose on the earth. But Ungoliant it's not insignificant that she comes across this territory of this other feminine power in order to reach the trees, which are living creatures, which are
Right.
themselves tended by the feminine deities. And then she destroys them. She engulfs them. That
Right.
whole sunlight that he brings up. He says,
Unlight. Yeah.
a cloak of darkness she wove about them when Melkor and Ungoliant set forth, an unlight in which things seemed to be no more, and which eyes could not pierce, for it was void. That's what you brought
Yes.
up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So we recently, in the last chapter or two chapters ago, Morgoth cloaks himself. Right.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go cause trouble. But he cloaks himself in a cloud. It's like a storm that
Yes.
passes by. Everybody sees it. The Teleri are like, "Oh man, there's a big storm rapidly passing by." Tolkos comes up. You seen Melkor anywhere? I don't know. I saw a storm go that way. I think it was probably him. All right, chase after.
Yeah.
Like that's how Melkor can like cloak himself. Okay, we all know it's you, buddy. Like you're in your Batmobile and you're driving away. Ungoliant cloaks them in the nothing, right? A la Never Ending Story. which is, yeah, you look at it and it's like what you see if you were blind. It's you see nothingness. It's void. It's hollow.
Boy,
It's nothing. It is
that's
unbeing, unf unferth in the biggest
right.
sense of the
Well,
word.
yeah, and the word unferth comes up because the Anglo-Saxons did an interesting thing when they talked about this negative energy. They didn't call the negative energy a thing. It was
Right,
frequently defined by the positive energy. You just put un in front of it. So unferth and unfeeling and unfailed and all
right.
that. Those are
Yeah,
un.
like opposite of man is not woman. It's not male, female. It's man is unman. Thing is
Yeah,
unthing.
yeah.
Light versus unlight. Like it's not darkness.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of light, because light is penetrating. So you have to have something that's penetrating and enveloping. It's gonna be
Yeah.
unlight.
And you can't have a
Uh,
word. Can't have a word for a nothing easily. I mean, you can't talk about it. What's
no,
it look? Was it shaped like?
right. There's nothing. Not a whole. A
So
whole would be something. And this is
to
where
know,
everybody, your supplemental reading is go and read the first, at least the first half, at least the first two chapters. But ideally, the first half of the Neverending Story, if you want to understand
mm,
this. He does a really good job with explaining this, and because he takes as a starting point this concept that Tolkien has in the Silmarillion for this unlight. Um, if you look at it, and you see nothing, this void, and he extrapolates that. He makes that the primary antagonist, effectively, of the whole of the Neverending Story. Is this nothing that's devouring everything?
yeah, I think that the same thing happens in the trilogy of Earthsea, the Earthsea
Mm-hmm.
story, Ursula Le Guin, where there's a nothingness that's devouring the world in the third novel.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that image, we see there are modern examples. Like you brought up modern examples of the spider image. I'm thinking primarily of that great story Coraline, that was made
Mm-hmm.
into a stop motion animation movie as well, where the other mother in the other world, the world of darkness that Coraline goes into, other mother ends up being this gigantic spider that tries to devour Coraline. It's a fantastic story. Um, but here she comes across and she does this awful thing to the trees, but she does it in the midst of a feast, because there's this feast that goes on that is actually called by the Valar, right? Actually, no, sorry, beg your pardon. It's actually called by Manwë. So he
Mm-hmm.
declares this feast, and he says, let's heal the evil that's risen among the Noldor. Let's put an end to it, because the strife is terrible. So let's try and put an end
Right.
to it. It's this great feast. So in the midst of this feast comes this terrible problem that occurs, and it's
Feast of
kind of,
reconciliation
yeah,
and healing.
yeah,
Okay.
and it ends up being that the feast in some ways saves them because they're all in one spot, but it's also in the midst of the feast that this thing occurs. And we see an element of this feast, we see an element of this dark unlight in something that happens at the feast as well. Because, of course,
Mm-hmm.
it calls all of the Noldor and all of the other elves, the Telerian and Valar, to this feast. And it says that one thing only marred the design of Manwë. Feanor came indeed, for him alone Manwë had commanded to come, but Finwë came not, nor any others of the Noldor or Fomenos. For said Finwë, while the ban lasts upon Feanor my son, that he may not go to Tirion, I hold myself unkinged, and I will not meet my people. And Feanor came not in raiment of festival, and he wore no ornament, neither silver nor gold nor any gem, and he denied the sight of the Silmarils to the Valar and the Eldar, and left them locked in Fomenos in their chamber of iron. So Feanor comes to this feast, but he comes without the Silmarils. Nobody else can see the Silmarils. He has them locked away in his dragon hoard now.
He
And
has
it's
been locked away in darkness.
yeah, and darkness. Right, right, right. So it's kind of it's a dragonish, almost spiderish thing that's being done there, where he
Mm.
refuses to bring them out for anybody else to see. And then when his brother, Fingolfin, tries to make peace with him, Feanor is just kind of silent. He shakes his hand, but he's
Yeah,
silent.
sure.
Going on there
Mm-hmm.
that he's not revealing, which we'll see further down the road. But even this is this example of poison that's going on in the Noldor already.
Exactly. So this is again this Tolkien is illustrating literally what's happening at the higher level is happening at the lower level.
Yeah.
And so we're between Feanor and Fingolfin, and then you've got, Feanor and all of his stuff, this moral darkness, psychological darkness, and then at a higher cosmic level, you've got creeping nothing, the creeping unlight crawling
Yeah.
towards the trees to devour them, which are the source of the light of the Silmarils to begin with.
Yeah, and stories like this abound in Norse mythology of men, especially, but also
Really?
women who harbor a deep anger or envy or unrest of some kind that then
Mm.
turns poison, and they end up being murderous, or they have they're exiled because of their anger or whatever it is. And so we're seeing something which is like a poison already in the veins of Feanor, like the brilliance or brightness of what he should be has been tainted by the insults that have been done, the perceived insults that have been done to him. Okay, so that being said, then comes this great scene. This is one of these more memorable scenes in the work. It is told that even as Feanor and Fingolfin stood before Manwë, there came the mingling of the lights when both trees were shining, and the silent city of Valmar was filled with a radiance of silver and gold. To get the two trees, silver and gold trees, and the lights mingling with this beautiful, like, apex of brilliance and light at that moment.
Yeah.
And in that very hour, Melkor and Ungoliant came hastening over the fields of Valinor, as the shadow of a black cloud upon the wind fleets over the sunlit earth, and they came before the green mound as a lohar, because all of the folks are distracted. Big hoedown that's going on. Then the unlight of Ungoliant rose up even to the roots of the trees. It's a great image. The lights are at this swell, and some of this unlight just comes and just closes in on them.
Right into it.
Melkor sprang upon the mound, and with his black spear he smote each tree to its core, wounded them deep, and their sap poured forth as it were their blood, and was spilled upon the ground. But Ungoliant sucked it up, and going then from tree to tree, she set her black beak to their wounds till they were drained. And the poison of death that was in her went into their tissues and withered them root, branch, and leaf, and they died. Still she thirsted, and going to the wells of Varda, she drank them dry. But Ungoliant belched forth black vapors as she drank, and swelled to a shape so vast and hideous that Melkor was afraid. I love that.
That's great.
Talk about a great character.
Yeah. So
wow.
she drinks up the wells of Elbereth Gilfonia.
Yeah.
Varda.
Yeah.
The supreme goddess of
Yeah.
light and all of that. Drinks up the wells of water and transforms it into this smog of death. Vapors.
Filth and darkness everywhere.
Yeah.
He swells to a tremendous size, which again you could say similar to
bloated spider. Yeah.
If
you've ever seen a really grotesquely bloated spider, the thing looks like it's gonna pop, any minute, and it somehow is just haggling on. Absolutely disgusting.
It is. It's horrible, and that's probably why it sticks in the head. I mean, I know that the Greeks' tragedy, the violence and tragedy was always there in order to punctuate the message, in order to make the message. Yeah. They weren't just telling stories about sons marrying their mothers and killing their fathers just because they thought that was fun. Yeah, right. Because they thought it was fun. They're doing it in order to make the message stick. You really, you don't always saying, "Gee, what was that about?"
Right. I think I saw that one. I don't know. But it's gosh, was it? One application of this, of course, we know is very near and dear to Tolkien's heart is the machine, and the image of sucking up. First off, destroying, withering the trees, root, branch, and leaf, which is a set phrase for Tolkien. He uses that at other key moments throughout his works. Root, branch, and leaf. But the image of sucking the wells dry, the sacred wells, right? That's what they are, right? Sacred wells, sacred springs, holy wells, sucking them dry and belching forth vapors as it just grows to this massive bloated size. I mean, that's any industrial era plant on a
Oh
river,
yeah.
right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's sucking up the holy well that's by the river, some sacred site, some grove that predates living memory of man, and just belching forth pollution
Yeah.
into everything.
Dark.
And so, where it's not an allegory of that, it's rather the mythological, the cosmological level reality of what's going of saying, okay, I can point to this in the machine here, say this is Ungoliant at work at a lower level on the cosmological hierarchy, but this is that same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, those dark satanic mills that was
Yeah,
railed.
exactly.
You know,
There you
it reminds me of we just watched the series Chernobyl, which is a great series, but really depressing when you see it, and was depressing in real life for that matter. But it doesn't mean that nuclear energy is totally bad. It just means that this is the example of something that's gotten really out of control due to human hubris and human failings. But when it got out of control, it got it out of control on a big scale, like a very large scale.
Oopsie. Yeah.
Yeah. Gee whiz. And I love how Tolkien ascribes that getting out of control business that we see in Feanor. He ascribes it really to a much more primordial thing going on in the earth itself. That is the powers, these two Ainur, if you will, that come upon these trees of life and beauty and the well of beauty. And they create something that says further down, the darkness that follows more than loss of light. See, this is where I'm getting back to that. It's a thing in and of itself. It's not just the loss of light.
Yeah.
In that hour was made a darkness that seemed not lack, but a thing with being of its own. For it was indeed made by malice out of light, and it had power to pierce the eye and to enter heart and mind and strangle the very will. Reminds me a lot of that. What's talked about later, the black breath of the Witch King,
Yes.
right? And the knife that goes into Frodo. Similar.
Yep. Yes. Exactly. That black breath. That's, I think, a great connection. Because it does, especially when we see how the black breath. There's sort of a medical analysis of it in the Houses of Healing, in Return of the King. But it goes in, and people, they suffer the black breath, and it slowly takes them away into a meaningless nightmares, and they just lose the will to live.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. We see that infecting a number of people in different ways in there. But I think it's exactly right. I mean, that's the same kind of vapor. It's a highly diluted, like less concentrated version of it, but it's got to be the same thing.
Yeah, but my dad used to talk about how Tolkien was the one of the few messengers of hope of the 20th century, and I think pretty important because hope is a very important thing for humans to cling to. When you start looking at the universe as an empty void, right? That we're all destined for worm food, or we're all the darkness triumphs, right? That there is a tendency, who cares? What does it matter? Throw in the towel now. Hopelessness, and that becomes an actual thing in and of itself in the story. It's not just a psychological problem that you can get rid of by sitting on someone's bench, or lying on someone's
couch,
psychiatric couch. It is a spiritual problem, or a problem of the powers of the earth, if you will, that does come over us. You could even say, I'm reading a book now on Achadia. It's like Achadia. It's this noonday demon, this noontime demon that comes over and says, what does it matter? It's all going to end in darkness anyway. Why are you wasting your time being good and holy and noble and an ascetic? Go out and live it up, because you're only going to live once and then die. It's like the wounding of the trees. Is what that is. These trees of hope and beauty are wounded terribly and then depleted. And when that happens, why bother? Why keep going? It's a tremendously powerful image, I think, and one that we should take to heart, because it's not going to be solved by just taking a pill or eating the right diet.
Yeah. It's a darkness that penetrates, fills the will. I think that's a very, very interesting, because it's also like despondency, which is forgotten about in Western taxonomies of the vices. But I think but since Pope Gregory the Great, it's folded in with acedia.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same thing. It's that absolute despondency, that depression that can sneak in. And it is penetrating. It's not just a lack of something like, you need involvement, Charlie Brown. That'll fix your problems. You just need to be involved. Do a Christmas story. It's something dark that penetrates in that, yeah, you don't, and it kills the will, it strangles the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And if it's connected
and
with primordial power, like the earth
yeah.
goddess, there's
Mhm.
this tendency to say, I don't know if I could fight this directly. I don't know if I can take this on. This is too big for me, so to
Yeah,
speak.
right.
Uh,
And in many ways, if even Morgoth is afraid of it,
yeah,
what can he
right,
do? So,
right.
but the book doesn't end here. That's not the end of the story.
Oh,
Um, there's
so
something more,
that's
right?
interesting.
Like,
Yeah, it's interesting you
it
bring that up
could.
because the chapter ends by saying that he's achieved, Melkor goes his way, whether he wouldst, his vengeance was achieved.
Yeah,
But then the rest of the story, right? You can't stop there.
right.
It's a great little vignette that I remember from my own family when my mom and dad were first married, and my mom, who had grown up with the best story she had was like Fun with Dick and Jane. She never really read any great stories. And so she marries my dad and thinks, well, this guy really knows his stuff. He's a literary guy and all this. And they're driving down to wherever it was, I think Natural Bridge in Kentucky, and they're reading The Lord of the Rings on the way, right? And they get to
Yeah,
that scene of Khazad-dûm when Gandalf falls into the pit of fire, and he's gone. And for all intrinsic purposes, he's dead. I mean, if you've never read the book before, he's dead.
he's dead.
And
Yeah,
closed the book, and she just burst in tears, partly because of the story. This was just one more story where the good guys die. Like all these stories she'd read were these depressing 20th century, stories of death and destruction. And she had married a guy who said this was a great story, and so she just ruined her own life by marrying this man. And Dad said something to the effect of, "You've got to keep reading because you don't know the end of the story yet." And so she did. And there came my brother and myself and all the rest of us, two-headed ogres, And and I mean, it's true. It's like if you look at the world as being nothing more than everything dying, then human life itself is like, why do we bother with any of this? Because
Mhm.
it's pressing and it's going to come to nothing, and we're all going to get burned anyway when the sun goes, super giant or whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't know the end of the story. We don't know, and we've been around a long time on this world, and
Mhm.
old as the elves, so to speak. So I think
Mhm.
that speaks to that, and that the story doesn't stop there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we know the trees don't get, per se, remade, but the world doesn't even stay in darkness. This
Mm.
is not the end.
But they do get remade, and that's an interesting thing to me, because at the end of the
Mhm.
Lord, Aragorn goes up onto the hill and he finds a new tree and puts it there into Skiliath or whatever it is, and that's
And
that's
it's and that's not just a continuation of a symbol. That's a seed. That's a sapling from this tree, which descended from that tree, and which came directly from these two trees.
and you can even say that when Sam goes back to the Shire to find
Yes.
it, it's been sucked dry by Sharky, but essentially by Ungoliant. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Sharks and
Exactly.
set up river. So they begin repairing it. And the thing that strikes him the most, that really causes him great grief, is the cutting down of the party tree.
Right.
So near the end of the story, I think it's the second to last chapter, he remembers this gift given to him by Galadriel there in Lothlorien. And it's a seed. It's one of the seeds of the
Valorant seed.
Aryan trees. And he goes and plants it, and it's the first one and the greatest one there that's west of the mountains, the Misty Mountains.
Mm.
The story, quote unquote, ends, so to speak, with the replanting of the trees. both there in the east and in the west. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I hadn't
Huh.
thought of that.
I
Well,
think that.
I'm back.
Well, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate good session today.
Thank you.
So,
That's good.
yeah, and good luck with the horses and with the spiders that attack you in Italy.
Thanks. We'll try and fend them off. Keeping the wolf from the door.
That's
Farmer Giles says.
well, wherever you to your Aries receive you at your journey's end.
May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks.
Take care, my. In a bit.
You
I'm going
too.
off.
Take care.